A life well lived, he thought looking back. He'd done all he wanted, and way more than that. He came in with a plan, and he kept it on track. Most people have highlights. This guy, he had stacks. He'd had the wife, the job, the kids, the house of his dreams. He'd traveled the world. He'd stayed healthy and clean. He'd faced off great heights, and though they were frightening, he'd fought them and he'd won, and that feeling was lightning. Well, the job ended, the kids moved out, he retired, so he sat down to relax. He'd done all that he'd ever admired. But as he sat there was one thing that caused him unrest. It stayed on his heart and it weighed down his chest. There was this one thing he'd seen all those closest to him go through. And now it seemed it was happening to him too. The first time he saw it properly, he was 20. It was his nan. It was sad, but it made sense, well, as much as it can. At 30, a friend's friend had to go. He tried to be there for them, but what did he really know? But at 40, it was his dad. It came out of the blue, no warning was had. The guy who'd been there since he was a lad, nowhere to be loved. It seemed so unnatural, so wrong, so bad, so he'd turned and ran and tried to clear his head like it was some bad movie he could easily forget. But though he lived his dreams, as I said, it stayed in his heart and it stayed on his head. From then on, there was a trickle that turned into a steady stream of people he loved he'd only meet again in his dreams. So the man sat there at the end and thought about how it could be done, how he could win the only battle that he hadn't won, because if only there was some way to pull back the pail, to rewrite the endings, to play fairy tales, if only there was an answer, some vaccine or a spell to give to everyone to make the world well. But as the man sat there at the end of his days, what felt so unnatural seemed to be the only natural way. It came to everyone. It seemed there was no stopping it. He couldn't reverse it, not even a little bit. But he was wrong, the man, as he kept up his search. There was one person who'd came back from the lurch. He'd been beaten and tortured until he had died. His friends had left him. His family had cried. He'd been buried down under the ground. His lungs had stopped breathing. His heart made no sound. Until it did. 3 days after he'd been laid down to rest, his heart started again to beat in his chest. He tore off death's grip, broke through its chains, and rose back up to full life again. This guy fought the only battle we couldn't, and he won. And whilst the fighting was over, something new had begun. Because he said he wasn't going to be the only one to come back from death to do what he had done. He begun the rewriting of the world into what was right, the start of the day and the end of the night. He died that we might have new life, that one day there would be no more death, no more strife, because his death paid the price for all the things we do that brings death about. That's why, as he died, he said, "It is finished," with a shout. So, all those that turn their lives back to God, back to him, will return from death too, go from winter to spring. They'll live with him forever, and those people will sing, "Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting?" So there is hope. There is an answer to death that heals us, that frees us. So give yourself up and fix your life upon Jesus.